posted them, and I thought, oh, I've got X number of black glass blocks. I had about 3 times what I thought I had. So
Ah,
someone got a very good deal.
oh, good. Well, if you need glass blocks, you're the guy to see.
No, not anymore. They're sold.
Good.
But no, there were, yeah, 84 of one size and 70 of another size.
Good.
And of course, I had to lug them all up from the lower deck,
Yeah.
where I had to fight the spiders for them.
Did the wind impact you at all?
Um, Stuff, a bit of stuff blown around the yard. We have an oak tree, which with climate change, I was very concerned about. So I had an arborist in and I had it thinned.
Mhm.
And it was whipping around last night. I was pretty concerned about it even thinned, but it's still there.
Yep.
But the other thing you don't realize is the damage that's done to roots by wind.
Right.
The tree rocks,
Yeah.
and what it does is the whole root structure pulls back and forth, and the little fine feeding roots get damaged.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
then the tree tends to go into drought shock because
Mm.
it's a big problem.
Yeah. I did a bit of cleaning up today, but just to say sweeping up the debris that is blowing around. Oh, there's Chelsea Deandrad. I was hoping we were going to have quorum. Yeah. 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 So Stafford's the only one we haven't. Corporate officer, did we hear anything from Councillor Lumley?
I haven't heard anything from him.
Okay. Well, we'll proceed. It is 3:00. We have quorum. We know that Councillor Ladwig will not be with us again this week. And so that we'll proceed with that. We also our CAO, Manny Machado, is not with us, and our Director of Infrastructure, David Newman, is our acting CAO right now. So he'll be with us, and he is with us. So I'll call the meeting to order, time being 3:00, and special committee of the whole to discuss the budget being held on March 29, 2021 for the town of Gibsons, and acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have an agenda, and I'd ask for approval of the agenda. Councillor Crowell, thank you. Councillor Lumley, thank you and welcome. And all in favor of approving the agenda? Thank you. And request that an agenda to receive all reports that are on the agenda today. Councillor Deandrad, thank you. Councillor Crowell, seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Reports are received. The first thing on the agenda is the budget consultation and survey feedback received. That information is primarily relating to the meeting that we held last week on the budget consultation, which seemed to be well attended and with good participation. And the survey itself is the one that was done earlier, which you had copies of, and that was done by our manager of communications. And that information is also available to you if you have any questions around that. I think it's important, though, if we do the budget consultation specifically, that we go over some of the responses and the feedback we received at that time, and to see if there is anything in there that gives us rise to any particular change that we want to make at this time to the budget, acknowledging that we still have the budget has to be adopted finally by May the 15th. And so we're in process of that. And that's the purpose of this budget meeting today. So I think we should just go down this list that starts on page 5 of our agenda, unless anybody has any other suggestions. Counselors, I'll look to you. Are you okay with that? Okay, just go down. Some of the things are general information. Some have to do specifically with the budget. I'd ask, for example, the RCMP building costs. Does the town pay after we reach 5,000? We weren't sure of the answer to that. There's still a 70-30 cost sharing with the province, we assume, at least, so that that's probably where that lies. And we'll know later on this year if the police services branch of the Ministry of Attorney General has agreed that they would be meeting with us and speaking to us about the whole police transition as the time became nearer. Public market funds can be more transparent in the budget with the flow through for the public market funds. Do we charge a fee or we don't charge a fee? Could the flow through grant funding model apply to other organizations? We have, in my recollection, used it for other organizations in the past. You have to actually have it as part of a town function in order for that to do. It's got to be part of or very closely aligned with a town function that we would have. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a town function. The CRA doesn't look too kindly if you're not part of the process, and that's why we can do it for the market, because we are actually a partner in the market, but we don't do it for all things that come forward. Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I think part of the other reason that with the flow through funding, the town of Gibsons is a registered nonprofit charity,
Yes,
and the market isn't. So it allows people to make donations to the market project as a charity through the town. Is that not correct?
That's what we're doing. We are actually issuing the tax receipts on that, and because again, it is essentially a town part of it. We're part of that function itself, sort of thing. That's why we don't actually charge a fee for service to do that service. How can we reduce the town budget by 5%? The big question, and I'm going to turn to council on that because I hear that stated back. What are your suggestions, council? Can we reduce the budget by 5%? Now, we have not. We will look at the budget a little bit closer later on, but one of the things that we have not done is we have not confirmed any decision of the staffing. And we're going to have some other big staffing costs now with the CAO gone. We're going to have to look at recruiting and hiring a temporary CAO to replace him. We don't have, it's in kind of an indefinite time frame for his return. So that certainly is going to be a cost. The organizational review that council wants to do is going to be a cost. And that is also not in the budget. So the only thing we do have in the budget this year, still on as a budget line, was the $39,000 that we had to offset the cost of the administrative staff to be an assistant to the corporate officer. So other 5%, the other big 5%, of course, is the policing cost. We could remove that, reduce it, or do whatever we want with. Does council have any ideas on what they'd like to do? Councilor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's quite challenging to expect that in a meeting, we just, okay, that's how we're going to reduce. Staff has not proposed anything. That would be a valuable thing for them to do themselves. Another option, obviously, that's why I proposed the performance auditing, because it's hard sometimes for anyone to see, right? You are inside your own process, the way you manage things, it's hard for you to see. So that's why you get an external. That could, it could be that there's no savings, that there's no efficiency to be gained. That could be the outcome. So we will know that staff is the way the city has been run is perfect, but we hope to find some savings. And you discussed not too long ago about even revising certain services. It's not, I think it's irresponsible just to make a decision like that, unless there's an agreement that we could cut something drastically. Given the situation, if council think that it is responsible to reduce to 5%, then I think the logical thing will be the police police costs, because we will have to have eventually. So next time it will be a bigger jump. That's where I will go. But even though the review would be money spent, but it may give us whether slight restructure or a bigger restructure, and also the consideration of doing business as we are doing with COVID now online. So there has been a shift as well. So perhaps an external consultant could help us with to see things that we are not able to see right now. But I would go, I mean, if that's the case, if there's a willingness to cut, okay, then don't increase the 5% police.
Councillor Pearl?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I think that the thing that, we tend not to be looking at is how many projects we took out of last year's budget because of COVID. We've moved them partially forward to this year. We've moved them to 2024. We've moved them to 2023. The request for the review that Councillor D'Andretti is asking for is probably, because it's not a line item, we're probably looking at a minimum of a 3% tax increase just to cover that. You look at the feedback we've gotten from the community. People are looking at improved roads. They're looking at improved park services. They're looking at improved tennis courts. They're looking at pickleball courts. They're looking at X, Y, and Z, which staff have indicated we're just marginally able to keep on top of maintaining what the infrastructure we've currently got. Quite frankly, and I keep harping on like a broken record, I'm the guy who hates to see my taxes going up. But by the same token, I think we have to assume some responsibility for future generations and stop shoving stuff off on them. Policing, how long can you ignore it? You put forward the proposal that, the population number be changed, that we'd be given a phase in. Even for that to possibly happen, going through the cogs of provincial government could be 4 or 5 years before that came to fruition. And in the meantime, we've been hit with the 5,000 figure that currently exists under the present system. So I don't think we can keep shoving stuff aside and cutting. We're in the mess we're in today because previous governments have cut or maintained the status quo, and they haven't kept up with inflation. They haven't kept up with maintenance. And, what are you prepared to have fall apart or break because we haven't looked after it? So quite frankly, I don't think, staff have indicated what they would like as an increase, and it's way more than what we're even proposing that they have to operate with. So, I think we need to bite the bullet on the 5% and look at the tax that we've got in the current budget as proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Lunley, have any comments on that?
Well, 5% of your total expenditures is around $340,000. That's a big number.
5% of taxation is about $165,000.
Oh, is that all they're asking for? I thought it was the whole budget. Is that what it said? 5% of taxation or 5% of the budget?
I'm interpreting 5% of taxation because that's the equivalent of the RCMP cost, which was one of the suggestions.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably have to agree with, I'd have to agree with Councillor Kroll. It's like, sure, take off 5% this year. Does that mean it's 10% next year? I don't know. I mean, nothing's going down. The price of real estate's going up, like beyond out of control. I don't know. I just learned today that my business is going to be closed until the end of April, or like April 19th. So nothing's going anybody's way, that's for sure. So yeah, if you just keep putting it off, I think the director of infrastructure, one of his presentations during the budget was just how much has been put off and how much more is being put off, and at some day it's going to catch up with you. So I guess if that, it's a tough one. I mean, I don't know if you can just wave a wand and take 5% off taxation. I don't know if that's the answer. So I just kind of have to be, logical about it and say, it's a necessary evil, I would imagine. I don't think this is probably the only community that's going through these things as well. So yeah, it's tough.
Councilor Brad, I saw your hand up.
Well, I understand if there is a goal of cutting because of COVID, and council feels that that's important, we could cut the police funding, knowing that regardless, it's coming back next year or the year after, or if we are lucky, it will take 4 years to build up. I would do this as an emergency, right? If there's a feeling that it's going to be too expensive, because it's going to be some funds that we will not touch. That's my understanding, right? We will put on the reserve to grow for future costs. So, I mean, it's a challenge because we will have to pay. That's the way I see it, right? And in terms of cutting more projects, I agree with Councilor Crow, because we're barely doing extra projects, right? And we need to, especially with COVID, that we travel less. I think it's very important, the investment in parks and in our community. I think that will be a trend. If you don't have too much money, usually you travel less. So you stay home, enjoying your community during summer or whatever the time. So I don't know if the cutting 5%, that's the challenge that I have. If this is a feeling of the whole community. I know the meeting was well attended, but was it still how many people? 17 people, 18 people? I'm not saying that they can have a good representation, but to me, it's very, I mean, for me to make a informed decision, I need to know more. So to me, it's right now gamble. Do we cut because this was raised, knowing that it's gonna come back and bite us? That could be an approach, and we wait, and we know, and then we inform the community that we're gonna have a bigger spike next year. But I think what I feel, I don't know how much the suggestions of cutting the 5% is really an opinion shared by everybody in ways that, yeah, people are really stranded that they cannot pay, right? So that's to me is the challenge of making a decision right now.
Here's my overall concern right now is still, I mean, we did reduce our budget significantly last year. We cut and cut and cut until we got it down to very fine tuned last year. And we were very fortunate to have the COVID funds come and help us to offset some of those costs that we incurred. We still have some of those COVID funds. I would like to suggest, and we'll talk about that later, that we use the COVID money to offset, for example, the refrigerator for the seniors this year, as opposed to taking it from grant funding, other grants. I would like to have as a target a maximum of 5% increase this year. And we've got 2% on the taxation line already. That leaves it to 3%. So by reducing, and the place to reduce is frankly in the policing costs. If we have a surplus next year, we can say that we can put some of that surplus towards policing costs as well. But I think that I would propose to myself that we reduce the policing costs to 2.5% for the reserve instead of the 5%. We have just over 1% in there. I believe that the treasurer was able to put away last year. And to me, it's transition money. It's not going to really soften the blow because we should have started that a lot sooner if we were going to do that. But certainly we are going to have some transition costs, and I think that if we were to reduce the policing cost to 2.5%, that would still be putting in 60, almost $75,000 or 70,000, yeah, $75,000, coupled with the 39,000 or so that was able to put away last year. We've got just over $100,000 on the policing costs, which is just over 4% perhaps. But then the other money, the money we set aside that is continues in the budget right now is the money for the position. We're either going to spend that on the position or we're going to spend that on a consultant looking at a service review. So we need to talk about that. We can talk about that later. I don't suggest we take that out of the budget. I think we should retain that money in the budget and keep that as a line item. So if we were to, I think the director of finance is with us. If we were to reduce, if I could speak to her and ask that question, if we were to reduce the policing reserve this year by 2.5%, would that then give us a total overall 4.5% increase to our budget over last year?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The 2% was embedded in the base operations, and then council had added another 5 for policing. So if you just add 2.5, that makes a total of 4.5.
Yeah. So if we were to, so take that, I'd be happy with that, or take it to the 5 even. What are your views on that, Councillor Crowell?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. We'd proposed last year 2% for policing. And we thought, okay, we have an opportunity to catch up a bit, going to 5%. Now you're talking about reducing it to 2.5%.
2.5 or 3, whatever.
Well,
yeah.
Why not go 2 and 2 and just have what we and go 4? Keep it a full percent. We know we're going to be faced with the cost of policing, and we're just prolonging the agony. And are people going to be happy this year thinking, oh gee whiz, we get away with 2.5%, but next year we're going to get slammed 15%? Where do you want the pain inflicted? I would rather have gradual pain than
the pain is going to be ongoing. It's going to be a lot. Yeah.
And the other thing is, this whole COVID thing. Did you see the numbers that came out today?
I haven't seen today's numbers. No.
Highest totals ever for the province. There's something like 2,400 new cases over the weekend, and a lot of them are variants. So, injections or not, COVID seems to be still with us.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen in the next year, God knows. We now have the Brazilian variant, which is running rampant. 2 other variants that are running rampant. And, to say we've got COVID money, we may need every penny of that. And what, while we're in a position to keep abreast of things, or at least keep pace with things, the business scene could be 10 times worse next year if these variants take hold.
Yeah.
I think when I was faced with a project, I tended to front load them, get as much done as you can up front, so you're not having to pay overtime at the other end to get it finished. And this is painful for me to say, because, I would rather see a little more of an increase now while we have some wiggle room than find ourselves back to the wall and no money coming in.
So you're okay with a 7% increase for this year of the budget?
I'm the guy whose taxes went up $40 a month last year, and I'm tightening my belt for what they're going to go up this year. The value of my home went up.
Yeah.
due to circumstances beyond my control. But as long as, realtors are running around inviting people to come to the coast, buy houses, rent them out as short-term rentals, make all sorts of money. Yeah, we're faced with it. Prices are going through the roof here, as Councillor Lumley said. And, welcome to the real world.
Okay, other thoughts? Because right now I'm not hearing any emotions. Yeah. So we're status quo still. Yeah. Councillor Lumley, then Councillor D'Andrade.
You're really just deferring it. So, I mean, that's all we're talking about. We're talking about a tax deferral. So.
Well, it's not a tax deferral because the reserve is not the tax is going to be a tax next year.
Yeah, but
yeah.
So. I'm not speaking technically, but I mean, instead of building up a reserve early, we're just going to have to build one later. So, I mean, do I think that's the right thing to do? No, but I've only have one vote, so I would leave it at 7%.
Okay. Councillor D'Andrade, you.
Yeah, like I said, I understand that some people are concerned with the 5%, but at the same time, it's not that we are building a giant swimming pool and it's a luxury, right? We are faced with a lot ahead of us and basically maintenance of the town. So I think the 7% is reasonable. And actually, if we have a chance to all the motions that the request to the province that consider perhaps the 6,000, I mean, we might have some relief in the near future, right? Perhaps only when we get to 6,000, so we have time to build, but at least we continue building. I agree. I prefer having slow increments than having a big jump. So
good. Well, we don't have to do anything because the budget reflects that right now and reflects the 2% and the 5%. So we don't have to make any decision. We just move on. But it's important we have that conversation so that we understand why we're doing it and that the public understands why we're doing it. So thank you for that. So the next item on this list was can we reassign staff to cover for other departments? For example, do we have 3 planners? Do we need to? I'm not sure that the level of service that's anticipated in that question is a level of service that we want to occur in the community. I know that right now there's a lot of conversation going on with some of the developers who are concerned already with the level of service, not necessarily from Gibsons, but we are part of the conversation, and where they are having to defer projects because they cannot get a building permit approved, and they're having to either lay off staff, or in some cases, they are saying pay for staff to not work. It's just so they can retain a crew on the coast while they're waiting for the building permit to come forward. So using Vancouver as a 1-year example of that it's an acceptable time frame, I don't believe that is an acceptable time frame. And so that I don't think that would move staff from those departments into doing other lesser work. Besides the fact that our planners are trained as planners and are specialized as planners and they're paid as planners, and other staff are trained for other purposes. So that and they're hired for other purposes. So I don't think that is a reasonable suggestion at this time. Comments with Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I think staff have been very good where possible, utilizing the services of the people we have. For example, in parks, the number of parks workers that were trained to operate some of our heavier vehicles, to get special licenses so they could, and training, so in the winter, they could drive salt trucks and snow plows. Where other municipalities have seasonal workers who come in to work and cut grass one season, and they bring in another crew or contract out to do snow removal. You know, this year I think we got off fairly lucky with our snow accumulations in the community, but last year our town staff, with the training that was brought in and utilizing park staff to operate the salters and the plows, we had the best streets on the coast, certainly better than the regional district and way better than the district of Seashelt. So I think, you know, being able to utilize the people within areas, you know, staff are already doing that.
Yeah, we do cross train already within areas.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, I just wanted people to be aware of that, because I don't think a lot of people in the town actually are aware that, you know, staff have gone to that extra step. Even where our staff have worked, Tyler Musgrove, who's looking after parks, you know, when complaints came in about the playing fields, you know, he reached out to the regional district and the district of Seashelt. They came together, they worked together to upgrade all the things. Rather than everyone doing it in a silo, they teamed together. They bought a piece of equipment to improve playing fields that's shared between the communities. So, you know, it's sometimes people are very critical because they see a new vehicle thinking, oh, the town's wasting money. But, you know, there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people really need to be a little more appreciative of the level that staff do go to be cost effective and cost efficient, and, you know, do the best they can with what they've got.
Thank you, Councillor Kroll. Councillor Diandrat?
I particularly feel that it's irresponsible to start picking up, oh, let's cut here, let's cut there, without really an understanding. With regards to Vancouver, I wonder, because the construction there, sometimes you talk about buildings, right? So it doesn't mean that there's less planners comparably. It could be because to build a building, it takes way more. So to me, that's why I find so important to have like an outside person, because then we can really see find efficiency if possible. And now you're making an informed decision. So cutting planners, you're cutting things, I find, because unless we were in a super emergency and to the point that you have to say, okay, we have to cut, and whoever was hired lately or whatever, something like that. But that's not the case at this point. So I feel comfortable doing informed decision, understanding, and perhaps we could, have some incentivize staff to find their own savings in terms of, if there's anything that can be done. Because I understand that at management level, this is always the case. They're always trying to find, but perhaps we go a step further. This kind of thing, I think it's productive until we get the review. But to me, it seems a little bit aleatory just to say something like that, right? Without knowing. It could be the case that we could do that, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Okay, request budget trend information. I understand the response on that one is that it will be easier going forward with the new budget package we have that Director of Finance is implementing now, so that I think that we'll see that come out in the future, and easier to compare. Basically, what they're asking for is not budget, but actual expenditures, which for us doesn't normally come out until the audit. But that's what the auditors are going through doing now. So FOI policy, we need to have a policy that ensures access to information to reduce the need for FOI requests. I'm not sure I understand this one. I mean, we have a policy, we have a bylaw that mirrors the authority of the FOI legislation. And we have to remember that it's freedom of information and protection of privacy legislation. And so that we work within the constraints of that bylaw. And I'm not sure that you want to relax the legislation. I don't have a sense we do. We get a lot of requests for information. A lot of requests for information are handled already without recourse to FOI. Those ones that come within the jurisdiction of the Freedom of Information Act are handled within the jurisdiction of Freedom of Information Act. And I'm not sure that you want to relax that and say, well, even though the act says this, we'll do it differently and we'll provide more personal information or business information than people will be otherwise entitled to. So I'm not sure what the general thought is on that. It's not the volume of FOI requests; it's the scope of the requests that is the issue. Because we get relatively few requests, we get them all from the same people, and that seems to be and the scopes are varying level of detail, and that's part of the challenge that staff have to meet with, and that's a timing issue. So, Councilor D'Andrade, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think, again, to understand, you need to do an evaluation. I mean, I can only assume the kind of FOIs, but I don't really know, right? Because I don't have access to the requests. So again, we need to know, but I can anticipate that, projects at large scale, I may assume that a lot of the FOIs are regarding environmental issues. So perhaps what this meant was, if we know, for example, a peer review documents, right, that have reports, that have environmental statements that the public is interested in and have the right, that we could post immediately, right? I mean, just the time to cover whatever is necessary, but without having a request. So perhaps that's where this is leading. It may still encompass work because someone would have to block certain things, right? But I think that's what it is. But again, I think that's one of the things that I would like the review to analyze. What's the type of request? Why this is happening? And even a comparison. Is it normal? Is it that because if we know that every single municipality go through the same kind of request, we need to incorporate this in our budget, right? We need to understand, okay, this is an expense that because we are democratic, it will happen. I don't know. It could be that this kind of requests are more here in the town of Gibsons, and that's what I'm interested. Is there anything that learning the type of requests and having a comparison, if it would give us some, clues how we can solve this situation? And another thing, I think sometimes things could be discussed more openly in council. I think a lot of the requests, because when things are not discussed openly, people start imagining, and it's not the best imagination. So,
other comments? Again, it's doing another study. It just is. We'd have to find some budget for that if we were going to do studies. Okay, and role of ICBC. Well, ICBC will still have a role. I mean, online renewals of motor vehicle licenses is just that, but you've got a lot of different things that ICBC does here, including BCID and driver's licenses, driver's testing, and out of province registrations. And there's a lot of people who just would rather come down and get the sticker and go away as opposed to do it online. We'll see how that works out. It'd be an interesting exercise. Obviously very important for many more remote areas where you actually have to travel out of town to go to an ICBC office. And there's many of those in the province. So they will definitely benefit from online renewals. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor. ICBC does provide revenue to the town.
Definitely. Yes.
So it's not like they're an expense to us. And they're a drawing card. They bring people into the lower village.
mm-hmm.
And also they renew the BC Med cards as well. And I think a lot of people are more comfortable dealing with the government agents to do that than a business.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. We can go through these one by one, but assuming you've all picked them out, do you have your favorites that you want to look at? The next set are all bulleted, and like, for example, I see the last one on the page. We have the issue of Srd tax increases. I can now tell you that instead of the just over, it's now 11% was the final number on the tax increase to the town for the Srd this year. The Srd approved 12.65 positions this year, new positions. And so the total cost, now that not all the functions we're involved with, but the total cost now to the town, instead of, I think it was 18 some odd, was initial, just over 9%, 9.5% was the initial phase one. And then at the end of the process, with the addition of some more garbage dump stuff, landfill stuff, we added, it increased up to 11% being the increase to the town's cost this year. So approximately $2,250 per $100,000 in taxation. Okay. Anything there anybody wants to bring forward? The first session is a session I was involved with. What about the session, Councilor Diandrad, that you were involved with? Is there anything out of that you want to bring forward?
Yes, I think one thing overall, there's a lot of questions that I wonder if the communication officer can take this. So next year when we present the budget, there's questions that are already answered. I think this is one idea, right? Because even questions like how does park predicts the budget or whatever, how the budget is done. But I think one thing that came across is like park maintenance, and especially with parklands, because the size, there is a willingness of certain groups to participate. I know it's challenging. We went through this year with with the liability issues and stuff. So I don't have a solution, but one thing is there are groups that want to participate in park maintenance, and perhaps with the invasive species, that could be another one, but depending on the species, you have to have technical people around. I know in certain cities, that's the case. I mean, we have stream keepers here that they do some work, but I think what I say is if there's any way that the town could, understand if this could be amplified, and it could be there's more work more expensive to do this with the community than with staff. I don't know. Again, I don't have because I don't have the facts, but that's something that came across with the parks. So,
Councilor Kroll.
Thank you, Member Beamish. The one thing, the whole invasive plant issues is a big one, and it still hasn't been, because we're still struggling with where to get rid of it. And until the South Coast Green Waste is resolved, and it means, like, I've talked with some local contractors who, the one contractor who does all the invasive species removal for the District of Sechelt, and his works yard is piled high with bags of invasive species that he can't get rid of. He basically has to let them decompose in plastic bags in his works yard. This is insane. We're talking about bringing in a invasive species bylaw, and what do you do with this stuff? So, and it's part of the problem with dealing with the regional district and a municipality that's surrounded by the regional district, and garbage and green waste being a function of the regional district. So until we get some of these other issues resolved, we're dealing with, chicken and egg and cart before the horse or behind the horse or beside the horse. But it's, the dump issue, which is a huge issue. And when I was sitting on the RD board, I kept saying, why aren't you doing something about the dump? And they were like driving this old car that kept falling apart, sinkholes, power failures, breakdowns, and they just kept pouring more money at it. So you can tell the dump is not my favorite topic.
Yeah.
But it's a huge, it's a money pit. Like, every time you turned around, it was another 200,000 or $500,000 to repair the dump, which is failing. You know, if people want to look at inefficiencies or where money could be saved, they shouldn't be casting their eye on the town of Gibsons.
Councillor Lumley, is there anything off these sheets that jumps out to you from your session you had?
It just goes back to like, yeah, mine was the recreation, of course, right? So I know there's a lot of interest in it, but I'd like to see some more detail. I guess that was my biggest thing, which is the biggest expense, right? So
yeah.
Like the biggest tax increase for us is that's their biggest expense. So I mean, I would just like to see a little bit more detail, but I have to entrust you guys that actually sit in front of it and see the budgets and stuff. And that's the work that you put in. And, you know, you guys do a lot of work at that. So I have to entrust that you have the same conviction to that budget as you do to ours. So.
They have promised the detail on that coming. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges we get, of course, is that even though we sit on there, we are one vote. So that you can object to something, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to make a difference. Although this year I did manage to put off a couple of things that were increases, but they would have increased us. But you still are one vote, so that other areas can vote to impact our taxes, and that's what happens. So. The overall in terms of our own parks, there is, as was mentioned, a lot of interest in tennis courts and pickleball. The tennis courts we have in town here, the 2 sets, certainly don't seem to be enough in people's minds to service the sport, so that looking at other alternatives or expansion of those tennis court areas would be an interesting thing to do sometime in the future. Not necessarily this year, but sometime in the future, looking at how we can expand the court surfaces. So, and pickleball and tennis, although they seem to be similar, they don't always get along. For the most part, they do, but there are differences there too. So I mean, we could spend quite a bit of time on these lists, but is there anything again on this list that Councillor Kroll?
In the group or in the room that Councillor Lumley and I were in, there was quite a bit of discussion around active transportation and perhaps a little more community input on the needs and wishes, and it's difficult, you know, when you're dealing with the Department of Transportation, because quite often they say, oh, we've got money, we're going to do this, and suddenly they're steamrolling the project and everyone's sort of chasing along behind, sort of saying, hey, we want to get this included in it, and they say, well, we've only got this much money to do it. You want your road refinished or not, right? So it's I'm quite sure Mr. Newman can attest to the fact that a lot of times we don't get a lot of opportunity to have as much input as we would like. But, you know, hopefully if we keep dialogue open with some of the interest groups with active transportation, that when these projects are announced, we have a plan in place that we can lay on the table and hope for the best.
Councillor Dean Dredd.
Thank you, Mayor. I know last time I spoke about that, and you even agreed that we could have a planning during the fall. But I just want to, I don't know, we might not need a motion, but I would like this to be really part of the budget that we start during the fall, the discussion with the community, because I feel by the time the budget is presented, it's already kind of late in terms of priorities. It's very hard for us to prioritize between Armour's Beach or anything, right? So I would like to have the discussion and the transportation active transportation as well. I remember when at the beginning of our term, we had a report, but I agree, I don't see too much how we are doing that in terms of with the community and priorities. I mean, it could be that things are being done, but we're just not aware, the public is not aware. So if we could have these discussions during the fall, then we could have this dialogue and show and perhaps even put more energy to get grants, right? Or if it's possible.
I think you will see a grant announcement very shortly. And so you see some of the projects that you see happening today, like, for example, Gibsons Way, coming down Gibsons Way, those were projects that were actually discussed with and consulted with during the last council.
Mhm.
So now they're just kind of getting done and completed. So the consultation has been held on those with people. People who maybe just moved out of the neighborhood, like myself, would say, "Well, where'd this come from?" Well, it's been in the works for 2 or 3 years, sort of thing. And the next big areas we're been talking about is Glassford and other trails in that area. So, Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, a lot of these items that are getting mentioned, I mean, I'd like to see them, maybe we should relook or look at community amenity packages that come in the form of development, especially with the way that everyone can see the way housing's going and the prices that some of these places are fetching. It might be good to take a look at it and do ourselves a favor and try and get some of these projects done, like even like playground. Like, I know the playground, and you're talking about tennis courts and pickleball courts. These probably should and could get all paid by some of these developers through community amenities. So
I think you do find that that's what happened up in Parkland. That's where the tennis court came from, so up there. So, Councillor Crowell.
I guess it was last year, pre-COVID, the town sponsored, and we got a grant through the province to do sort of a community participation on accessibility. Like, we talk about active transportation, but there's also, when you look at the demographic of the community, there's also huge accessibility issues. I just came across a neighbor of mine, and she had a medical issue, and one of her biggest problems has been transportation. As we discovered when we tried to do the meeting on accessibility, it was in the evening. The Handy Dart doesn't run in the evening. We even offered to pay for the Handy Dart. No, we can't have it operating in the evening. We need to know who's going to be using it. We need to know what their driveway is like. So, I think the census that's upcoming is going to be very interesting to see what the demographic of the community is. And, I still, you just have to walk around and realize that there are major problems for a lot of people just having basic access. Forget about, active transportation routes. There are people who cannot get out of their homes because there's accessibility issues. So, we've got a lot bigger issues that are just sort of lurking in the background.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to turn over to page 10, which is the budget wish list. This was the survey that we did. Pretty consistent with, I think, the questions that came up the other night. Consistent theme of sustainability, improving roads, safer, increased cycling, walking paths, protection added to green space, more affordable housing, especially rental housing, increased recreational opportunities, and the tennis courts mentioned again, and more community events and installations. We have, on that last one, we have retained the money in the budget this year for the music in the landing and for the beach, the other main project. Help me out, David.
Sea Cavalcade?
Sea Cavalcade. I want to say Beachcombers. That's stuck. Sea Cavalcade. That money's being retained, hopefully. We had a meeting with the Arts Committee the other night, and the both the survey as well as the responses we got to the two articles I had in the paper kind of suggest that people do want to see public art. Whole area idea of sculpture came up, sculpture walks, sculptures in the forest and stuff of that nature. And those are things we need to discuss again. They all take budget from somewhere, whether it's projects that are supported by individuals or businesses or projects that are supported by the town. The policy we had spoke to that will come back to us. So there's a number of things that these are things we need to talk about, as Councilor D'Andrade says, in the fall as we plan our next budget, start picking things off and saying, okay, where can we focus some energy? There's a couple big parcels of land up on Aurora Way that aren't being used at all right now. So the tennis courts up there might be interesting to put them out. I know that one area, I mean, we are providing tennis courts. They're not just for local people. We get a lot of people from outside of Area E and Area F in our tennis courts, and maybe we need to approach them and say, look, you guys prepared to put some funding in to help us offset the tennis court development costs, because it's a lot of it's a rural area as well as the town area using those facilities, just like we all share in the recreation costs. So, but maybe we can put this aside. We have our budget going forward this year. Maybe we should put this aside and say, okay, this is our budget 21 wish list. Some of these things are addressed. You will see a announcement, I think, in coming days about another grant for increased cycling and walking paths. So we'll see something there coming, and then we'll affordable housing, especially rental housing. There's a lot of movement on the coast. We've been doing a lot of support on that area. It'd be nice to see some of these projects actually move forward and get established. So that would be really important. So, Councilor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to understand, I don't understand what sustainably managed new development means. If I could have a clarification from the compilation, because I don't understand this at all. What does it mean, sustainably managed new development?
I don't know if there was any enlargement on that, and probably have to talk to Elizabeth from the whole of the survey, or go through the survey in more detail. That came from Councilor Kroll.
I believe it relates to the strategic growth project.
I think that's the point. If we put anything here, because when you read improve roads, there's no interpretation, right? I mean, you understand, but that it's a statement that doesn't, at least to me, doesn't give me anything. And I think it will be nice to understand what is sent, where this originated, what was the real, the real drive for this here, because this could be, the word sustainability can mean so much. So manage development, so.
Well, say maybe we'll talk to Elizabeth on that, and then maybe take a look at the survey itself. Back and see what came out of that. Okay, is there anything else in this section that council wants to bring up, or should we move forward then to the next item on our agenda this afternoon? Okay, Councilor Kroll.
I suggest we move on.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is, again, going back to the preliminary general operations and capital budgets, and the Director of Finance and the Director of Infrastructure are with us for that conversation. So Director of Finance, I assume you will be first.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we included the agenda, the spreadsheets that are included in today's agenda package are the same ones that were included on the March 23rd Committee of the Whole. And what's happened since then is the public consultation on March 23rd in the evening. So we wanted to just provide for reference the same information you had last week in case you wanted to look a bit further or ask any more questions. So the operations spreadsheet reflects the base 2% tax increase, and this generates 145,000 surplus, and that is available to fund the taxation portion of funding for the 2021 capital program. And as you are aware, obviously council has also have approved a 5% tax increase for future policing costs. And that one doesn't have any effect on the surplus, so it doesn't affect the capital program. I did include a graphic which shows the effect of the proposed 2021 rate increase, the overall 7%. And this is a comparison of last year's tax rate versus this year's tax rate for 3 sample home values, very similar to the graphic that the SRD used. I thought I would try that one out. Elizabeth and I thought we'd try that one out just for consistency for council. And you can see there that the impact on a $750,000 home would be just under $60,000. And as mentioned, that compares last year's tax rate per 100,000 with the proposed tax rate this year. If you compare, there's always a variety of ways you can compare last year to this year. If we compare the average home, which also takes into account the change in assessments on the coast, the number for an average home, which is sitting at roughly $650,000, the increase is closer to $85,000. So if you're looking at average to average, it's higher. If you're looking at rate to rate, it's slightly lower. But that gives you an idea of where that would, what impact that would have on that. As mentioned, the capital spreadsheets we provided, it's the same as the March 23rd version on there. And if council does want to look at those a bit more closely or have any questions on that, the Director of Infrastructure can bring them up on the screen if you want to discuss any items or have any more questions on those. And then also, of course, the 5-year plan is in there as well. And so we're both here either to answer any questions or receive direction that the committee might have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Infrastructure. Director of Finance. Dave, Director of Infrastructure, Acting Corporate Officer, did you want to say anything at this time?
No, I don't think so. I think you've got it covered. And as you know, we've already gone through and reduced the number of projects, but happy to go into any details on any of them if anyone needs a refresher.
Okay, so referring council to the table, it is on page, the graphic on page 23. Looking at understanding that graphic so that we're looking at $7.86 per 100,000 populated, 100,000 of assessment. And that's the increase we're looking at, Director of Finance?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's based on the 7%, and council has passed a motion for the 5% RCMP. You have not yet passed a formal motion for the 2%. I was just looking back at the recommendations so far. So that is the preliminary difference. And as mentioned, this is per 100,000 of assessed value. And these will change slightly once I get the revised rule, the revised assessments, and I should be getting those in the next couple of days. So this is an estimate at this point, but it'll be around there depending on what the final numbers come in from BC Assessment.
Okay, do you need a resolution from council at this time, Director, to proceed?
Yeah, so I do, and I guess it would depend on this point. So normally what I get is a resolution. Council has approved the 5% for the RCMP. I would like a resolution for the other portion to formalize that, and at this point that is the 2%. And then if you're ready to, then you could also provide a resolution that I prepare the bylaws at this point, or that can be brought up on the April 6th council meeting if council's comfortable there. But I will need a direction at some point to, yes, this is our number, and you want me to start preparing the bylaws based on that.
Either way, it'll come up at April the 6th if we pass a resolution now.
Right.
Back to us at April the 6th.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Council, what's your wishes? Councillor Crowell, go ahead.
Well, in order for it to come up at the next council meeting, don't we have to approve it here?
Well, we would, or we would have a separate item and a discussion at the next council meeting. So things, if we do a resolution now, it'll come as within the minutes of the in the meeting. If we don't do a resolution now, it'll be a separate item on the agenda. Councillor Kroll?
Then I would make the recommendation that the Director of Finance is asking for, so we can deal with it on the April 6th meeting.
So the direction that resolve the move that to increase the annual budget by 2%, plus the 5% already approved by council for RCMP reserve, and to direct the Director of Finance to prepare a bylaw. Councillor Kroll, was that seconded, Councillor Lumley? Seconded by Councillor Lumley. Any further discussion at this time? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's passed. So it will come back to us next week in the form of the minutes from this meeting. And then it helps move on to meet the final deadlines. There will be another public information session on the budget prior to it being finalized, so that we will be having another session with the community on that. Okay. Thank you for that. And thank you, Director of Finance and Director of Infrastructure. Going back now to our agenda. One item on there is the next of the organizational review. We've talked about this. We need to put some definition on this so we can actually get some process. The only money I mentioned is we have the $39,000 or so that was set aside within the budget currently for the staff position. Whether or not that will be sufficient, we'd have to go out for tenders for an organizational review. My recommendation to council is that it be a review that includes service levels, structure, and staffing, so that we can have an answer to council's concerns as opposed to more questions. And that's probably the best way to get that. But that being said, what you do on these cases, you go out and you can ask for a request for proposal. And with that request for proposal, you'll see although we would give a defined scope, we would see what also the experienced companies that would come for us would say that this is what we feel that is usual in this case, and this is what you need. So we need to look at doing that. We did not set a specific amount aside for that purpose, but I'm going to go to the Director of Finance. Do we have any reserves, the Director of Finance, that could be used for this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so in this case, one option would be basically it's the accumulated surplus, and this is the operating reserves that the town has, and it's for to cover unexpected items or items such as this that come up. Yeah, so there's reserves there.
Good. Okay. What's the health of that reserve? Can you offer? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, that one, it had quite an increase last year, and so the unaudited is just below $1 million. So it's a large one, but it's actually only about halfway to the target that I want to get us to. But there's a significant amount of money there. Yeah.
So $1 million should cover this project.
I hope so.
Councilor D'Andrade?
Mayor Beamish, I know you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting when I mentioned the FOI that this could be a completely different review, but I would like this to be included, and we can always make a decision, because I'm really curious if all this amount of FOI, it's really a common practice with all the other municipalities, and this could lead to some clues why this is happening. For example, if we have an analysis, the types, and could help us to address the situation. So I think it's fairly important in my view. I would like as a councillor really to understand if this is, so if this could be included in the request, and I think the request also include a comparison with other municipalities. I mean, we can always decide when the consultants make the details, because they do. They come with quite a bit of details that we don't do. But I would like just an understanding, the frequency, what kind of FOIs are just environmental or what else, and And so I think it's important because I feel this is one of the points that stress council, it stress staff, and put also in terms of time, consumes the staff time. So I think it's important to understand that.
Yeah, it's the scope of the FTI. I don't think it's the volume, but it's the scope of FTI is the things that.
Yeah, but we don't know.
Yeah. Councillor Kroll.
Through you, Mayor Beamish, to the Director of Finance. The target and the reserve that you, or the capital reserve that you have, you had a target that you were trying to move towards. If you're able to share your target, and just very briefly for the people in attendance, what those funds ultimately are intended for. Like you mentioned emergencies, but there are some projects coming down the tubes that obviously you've been anticipating coming and you're preparing for them. So I'm a little, this review of staff is a new project. It's not an emergency. It's not something that's broken down. The town is still functioning quite well without the review. I'm just a little concerned, putting our hand in the cookie jar for this project, because my anticipation, it's going to be an expensive project. So I'm just trying to protect the nest egg, as it were.
I'm just going to comment before the Director of Finance comments. In terms of the town has functioned quite well, I think that's probably not true, in the sense that staff have asked for an increase to assist with that functioning, and council has said no. Instead of an increase, we want an organizational review. So staff is still not functioning at the level that they would like to see it function. So, but the organizational review, Director of Finance can answer your question on that.
Just to be clear, Mayor Beamish, I was in support of the position that was requested by staff. And a review may come back and say, I don't know how your town is functioning with so few people. You need another 5 people.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Director of Finance.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So through you, so the operational reserve that I mentioned, so you'll remember with the water and sewer funds, part of the long-term financial plan is to get an operational reserve and as well as a capital reserve. And so the operational reserve target for water and sewer is 30% of operating expenses. And this really it's there to cover, it's like a savings account, like any home would have. You have 3 months of expenses to cover unexpected things, or drop in income type of thing. So this is a similar thing. So for the general fund, we're still got lots of work to do on a long-term financial plan. Like we haven't got it to the place of water and sewer yet, but in my mind, I know I'm aiming ideally 30% of general, and that's basically $2 million, right? It's a lot to get there. We've done we're really building it slowly but surely, which is great. Makes me feel better. We have a lot more wiggle room there, but there's still areas to go. And it's not an area that I recommend lightly that council dip into, because it's really there as a backup in case something really significant happens in the community, and we really need to dip into that. And then we know we have that cushion. And so it really is operational savings what that fund is for. And the reason it's available, I would suggest it as an option now, is because there's no clear cost amount that would go associated with this review. So it'd be hard for council to budget in the budget right now what that amount might be. And so I couldn't tax for it right now. So that would be an option to fund it later in the year once the amount is more clear. And those are funds that could be available for that. Of course, depending on the amount and whether council is comfortable dipping into that sort of savings account for that purpose.
Thank you. Councillor Lumley, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just back to the conversation about the hiring. I don't know. I don't think it was an organizational review. I think it was just a review of the position that was being hired for. That was the only, and to the conversation again, it was it's a position, or it's a group of jobs that have been, it's been an issue for, like, as far as I know, 6 years. And it's the same argument every time. It's just like IT, this, that. All I thought was that ICBC, front desk, all I thought somebody could come in and take a look at it. I spoke to someone, they thought that it could happen for less than $7,000, which isn't a lot of money. The only thing I wanted to look at was how that office is run. You know, it's, the town immediately said, oh, we need a manager of corporate services. Well, maybe we just need an office manager. I don't know. I mean, I didn't want an organizational review. I as far as I can tell, everything I get from planning and everything they do is spot on. Leslie Ann seems to be doing a great job, and Katie and everybody. So it's like, I don't know how it shifted from an organizational review. All I know is from my past experience is that whole front area, and Selena, the former corporate officer, it's always been a thorn in their side. And I just thought if an outside person came in and said, oh, here's what you should do, right? That's all I thought. I don't know if I'd vote in favor of a complete organizational review, because I think that probably might be a waste of money. So.
Councilor D'Andrade, I believe you brought it up. What was that? Was that your interpretation?
Well, no. The organization, I think, it's their interpretation, because the thing is, especially we are getting tough times ahead of us. So we are not here, again, it's very hard for me to judge, oh, should we have more planners or less planners? Based on what? Who am I, right? So for me to make a decision, I need to make an informed decision. And I think if we're going to be struggling in the future, this will give us the comfort, whether we find efficiencies so we can tap into that. And if we understand that there's no efficiencies to be found as well, because staff is doing, an incredible job in every single area of the organization, then the community also understands, because we will be questioned. That's why I'm in favor. Sometimes you need to we need to revise. It's reviewing their own lives. I'm sure even with this COVID in our own private lives, I know people are doing, right? Minimalism is becoming the new fashionable word that would be applicable in certain instances, and sometimes it would not make sense. But I think the organizational review, even though, it will cost money, but it will give an assurance for the future too. And I think this is important, because we are having very tough decisions ahead of us. So that's what I'm in favor.
Councillor Kroll next, and then Councillor Lumley again.
And this would be a question for Councillor D'Andrade. How much are you prepared to spend on this review?
Again, I don't know. Let's see how much. And when you do an organizational review, the consultant, they come up with specificities, right? And perhaps we can choose some specificities and not others. Perhaps certain sectors, like last time we talked about, probably we are not going to do a review of the.
All that aside, how much are you willing to spend of the money that we have in reserves?
I think look, this is a council decision. This is my opinion. I think the next step is to get the consultants to bring, and we can decide, okay, it's too expensive, we are not going to do it. So that's what it is. But I think an organizational review once in a while, business that are on top of, they have to do, and they do this intrinsically. They have to do. They do, because the big companies, they're always having to look at themselves, how we can do it better. So I see this as a positive thing. And actually, like I said, if the town staff is doing a great job in having the highest efficiency, it would also give confidence. So we won't struggle about this for a long time. And that's my goal.
And that's certainly the way I interpreted the conversation last time as well, is that you were looking for an organizational review. And that's why I said, well, if you're looking at that, you actually have to look at service levels, what services we're providing, why we provide them, at what level. So and it was more than just a departmental review, Councilor Lumley, as I understood it. That's why I had commented the way I had commented. So, Councilor Lumley.
The previous council just did a praxis review for public works, and out of that became Daniel, and that was all looked at. So like maybe we should hear back from, maybe someone's got to look into, like, we just did one for like one department. So I mean, I don't know, are we going to do it again and again and again? I'm just not sure. Maybe somebody can give us a little bit more information. For me, it was the operation of the front of the house and everything that's involved in there. That's what I was concerned with, because we were going to hire somebody for $90,000 or whatever it was, and just before you make those determinations, a little bit more information would be great. So that's all.
Well, maybe we need to have some more information in terms of idea. I mean, that's the whole idea. We need to define the scope of this project if we're going to go forward with it, sort of thing. And maybe understanding what was done with the Public Works Department under the last council. Maybe we take a look at that and see if we do it at a departmental level as opposed to an organizational level. That would be quite a bit of a different scope and a different cost factor. Councilor Kroll.
As my mom used to say, it never it doesn't cost anything to look. For Councilor Andretti's benefit, if we get an estimate from a consulting firm on what this review would cost, I lived through one at CBC and I was appalled at what it cost for the end result. But anyway, but I'm loath, we're trying to build a reserve for future needs. And we can get a quote, but I think we shouldn't commit funds to that quote until we get it and are prepared. I think if the community wants a review, then the community should be prepared to pay for it in a tax increase. Staff have worked hard to try and create a reserve to give us a nest egg against unforeseen things. And we know unforeseen things pop up like COVID and God knows what all else. So I think, we get a quote and put the quote out to the community. And if they want to pay for it in a tax increase, go for it.
Yeah, well, let's take the next step and let's get, how about if we have ask staff at this point in time to and it won't be soon because we're already down one staff member, and part of the corporate officer's role would have been to backfill for the CAO, but we can't do that right now, so that we'll because we have no one to backfill for the corporate officer position, so that they can't do those two. They're both quite intense. So we'll bring it back and ask staff to bring it back in terms of a proposal and take a look at the review light, which would be a departmental review, or the review heavy or full, which would be an organizational review. And then difficulty going out for quotes because you've got to actually have an intention to go through when you start getting companies to quote. But we could go out and get kind of an idea from somebody who's done it before as to what that would cost. So if council's satisfied to leave it there right now and give direction to staff that actually why don't we do a resolution that council would direct staff to come back with options to do a service departmental and or organizational review and service review because I think they have to go hand in hand in 2021. Mr. Newman, you've exposed yourself.
Now you throw me off again here. Just wondering if council, one possibility, or keep the funding in there for the position as recommended by staff, and then do what Councillor Lumley had indicated, and we can investigate as to that smaller review at this point, to see what the administration, how the administration department is structured, and we can come back to you then, knowing that the money is in there to hire somebody, but it might look different as to what person that is. Is that something that council could consider?
The money is in the budget still. We did not take that money out of the budget, so that money is in the budget. So if council happy with that, to do it, I mean, basically that's what I said, is to come back and look at the options of doing a departmental review and or a organizational review, and see what the relative costs and timelines of that would be. Councillor Lumley?
That makes sense.
So would you make that motion, ask staff to come back with a proposal, council? Okay, seconded by Councillor D'Andrade. Any further discussion on that? Before we go forward, we'll just take it one step at a time and see if we can scope out what we want, so we get it right, and then we know what we're talking about with consultants. Councillor D'Andrade, your hand.
Just to be clear, I just want to be clear. So the motion is to look at a departmental review of the administration, but also put a quote for an organizational review, just to have the.
That's right, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Take a look at the review,
yeah.
Like review full. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good.
All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Okay, thank you. That passes. So we'll wait till staff comes back. And then in the meantime, as I mentioned, we did not take that $39,000 out of the budget, so that we have the capacity of doing that position or a different position later in the year if we need to. Okay, discussion of the review process of the tree bylaw. What I want to do here is just we had said that we would review the bylaw. I just want we are nearing that 6-month process now. I just want to give a heads up to council what that plan is. And I've discussed it with the Director of Infrastructure, so I know what he's doing, but because there are questions out there, I just want him to inform council as to what that process is right now. Yeah. Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mayor Mish. So staff are going to be coming back to the April 6th Committee of the Whole meeting with a report regarding the tree bylaw. The contents of that report is some facts and figures as to how many trees have been cut, how many permits have been issued, etc. To relay to you the concerns that we've heard out in the field, and first and second hand from other people, as well as possible ways that some of those items could be addressed. And then also include a recommendation that before we actually go into completing a redraft, is to have a public meeting where, and then of course it'll have to be a Zoom meeting, and summarize that feedback that we receive from the public, and then report back to council again with the summary of that information, and either direction at that time or a draft bylaw that we feel could potentially address the concerns raised.
Okay. Council, have any questions around that process, right? Just in case you're asked out there what's happening, because we had said we would and we will. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page on that. Councillor Kroll?
No, I'm certainly happy with the direction staff are taking with this. There has been quite a bit of talk in the community with respect to how the bylaw is working or isn't working, as depending on your point of view. So I think, getting to a point that we can have some public engagement, I think would be very positive. get the issues out and find out what they are. And so, certainly totally in support of the Director of Infrastructure's direction.
Good. Other comments from council? Okay. Councilor Dion-Drad, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just make sure, I think, do we have a sense that meetings at 7 p.m. are better for the public? Just to make sure that whatever we do, we can have the best participation, and try to communicate. And I'm assuming that will be notes on the newspaper and things, but try to reach even more people so we have a full discussion, full participation.
I think 7 p.m. seemed to work pretty well with our last session, and haven't heard anyone saying they didn't have an opportunity to participate or be there. So, and we would of course advertise it and publicize it much like we did before. So, yeah, good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Newman, for that update, and we'll hear from you again on the 6th. That ends the reports on the agenda. We'll move now to inquiries.
Yes, if anyone who wishes to address council could please raise their hand and I will let you join the meeting. We have one person here.
You.
We have a Mr. Delaney.
Yep, I see you, Des.
Hi there. This is an unrelated question to everything so far. It's just on the White Tower project, and I just want White Tower Park Pond project. I'm researching a lot. I just wondered when an actual plan of what the work scope in that area will be available for viewing at all. I noticed I couldn't find it anywhere on the website, and it may just be me not being able to find it, but just if there's a possibility of seeing what's planned for that area on a plan.
Director of Infrastructure, can you comment on that?
Oh, sorry. My video always takes a moment to think about it. Yeah, I thought that it was on the website, but I will check to make sure it is, because it's a real excellent project that we're doing and was 100% grant funded. And that will be a project that's going to be tendered in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, definitely, I think that that's something that we want to showcase.
Could you send a copy to Mr. Delaney direct, and just because he's asked, and also put it up on the website?
Sure.
That's awesome. Thanks very much. That's great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Other questions?
I don't see any other hands, Mayor Beamish.
Seeing none, we'll move to the next meeting. That's regular committee of the whole will be held on Tuesday, April the 6th, and at 3 p.m. This was an off day today because we were actually going to have a workshop tomorrow, which we put off, but we will reschedule that as well. So that motion now to adjourn, and Councillor Kroll, Councillor Dion-Drad, all in favor of adjournment. Thank you. And how's our time? We have a 5 o'clock meeting too, as I recall. So we have a half an hour, or did you want to bump that time up? Can we bump that time up? Would you prefer? Yeah. Councilor Dion-Drad?
Well, I didn't have time to read the agenda because the agenda just came very before the meeting. So unless everything will be discussed, but I haven't really read the.
Right,
I know it's a short, but I haven't read it yet.
Half an hour, so get reading. So we'll see you at 5.
It will be more than plenty.
Yeah, we'll see you at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff, and thank you, public, for your participation and for joining us.